Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Om Ganana Antva Ganapati Gammavamahe Kavin Kavinam Upavashravastramam Jeshtarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anushranhoti Bisida Sadhanam. Om Mahaganadipataye Namaha. Om Keshwaya Namaha. Om Narayana Namaha. Om Madhavaya Namaha. Om Govindaya Namaha. Om Vishnuve Namaha, Matsudanaయ Namaha, Trivikramaయ Namaha, Vamanaయ Namaha, Sridharaya Namaha, Hrishikeshaya Namaha, Padmanabhaya Namaha, Damodaraya Namaha, Sankarshanaయ Namaha, Vasudevaya Namaha, Pradyumnaya Namaha, Aniruddhaya Namaha, Purushottamaya Namaha, Dokshaya Namaha, Narasimhaya Namaha, Achyutaya Namaha, Janardhanaya Namaha, Upendraya Namaha, Hare Namaha, Sri Krishnaya Namaha, Sri Krishnaya Namaha, Sri Krishnaya Namaha. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. Hari Om, Hari Om. Om Haim Hrim Klim Chamundaya Viche. 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 Hari Om. Sutta Maharishi is telling further in the Purana to Shaunaka and other Maharishis who are assembled in Naimisharanya. Since the elder son of eldest issue of Vedavyasa from Ambika, Dhritarashtra was born blind. Ambalika's son Pandu was made the king with approval of Bhishma. The driving force of the kingdom of the Mahabharata kingdom is Bhishma, with Hastinapura as the capital. The elder brother had two wives, Gandhari and Suvali, the former being the prime wife and the later was the second wife in Hastinapura. Gandhari was the daughter of Gandhardesha and brother of Shakuni, give birth to 100 sons, and the elder two being the notorious Duryodhana and Dusyasana. Actually, their names was called before Suyodhana and Sushasana, means they are good warrior and good administrator. Gandhari preferred to close her eyes always, out of sentiment, as her husband was blind. Suvali's son was Yutsu. Panduraja, the earlier king, was married to Kunti, the daughter of the king Surasena, and the paternal aunt of Lord Krishna. The Raja also married to Madri, the daughter of King Madra. When Kunti was a very young girl, her father asked her to assist sage Durvasa Maharshi, who came for a 4-month long sacrifice in the palace. Yajna performed by him, and after the end of the function, he was pleased to teach mantra to Kunti, which could invoke any of the gods and allied devatas, including Indra, Surya, Yamadharmaraja, and Vayu, as well as allied devatas, Ashwini brothers. Out of curiosity, Kunti, in her young age, experimented by invoking the sun god in her private chamber. And to her great surprise and dismay, she found Lord Surya himself standing before her and asked her as to whether she desired a son or a daughter. Being of a young age and preteens, she was flabbergasted at the odd statement of Surya. But since Kunti understood the predicament of the girl, Surya gave her the boon that her virginity would not be disturbed, but she would, however, be conceived. Kunti took her personal maid into confidence and even informing her mother of the incident. She did not step out of her chamber. After 9 months, she delivered a boy exceeding radiance and attraction with an inborn armory and earrings. So he had a kavacha called armory on the body, which is stick to the body, and earrings called Karanakundala. With the help of the maid, she arranged the child in a floating box and placed it on a nearby water body. A charioteer of the court of the king, Atirada, and his wife found the floating casket with a baby inside, and as they did not have any child, considered the child as a great blessing and brought him up, and he is going to become Karna in future. Since he had earrings in Baran and as Radheya after the name of the stepmother, thereafter Kunti considered the incident as forgotten of her innocent childhood. Subsequently, Kunti married King Pandu in a Swayamvara, as per the bride's own choice. But soon thereafter, King Pandu Maharaja, received a curse from Brahmana, who was targeted by the king's arrow mistaken for a deer in a copulation, and the curse was that if he slept with a woman, he would fall die at once. The king knew that without begetting a son, he would not be able to cross the river Vaitharani on the way to heaven at the entry point of the hell or heaven itself, and the soul would get stuck there itself. Pandu Maharaja suggested the scriptures would allow a virtuous Brahmana to sleep with her, and Kunti informed that she knew a mantra as gifted by Durvasa Muni, and by reciting that she could bless with children. Thus Kunti invoked Yamadharmaraja, Vayu Deva, and Indra Deva, one after the other, from time to time, and was blessed with 3 sons. So Dharmaraja, Bhima, and Arjuna, 3 children respectively. She also passed on the mantra to Madri, who begat Nakula and Sahadeva as twin brothers. Once, when Pandu ventured a wrong move to invite Madri, and Pandu died because of the Brahmana's curse as expected, and Madri too died in self-immolation, leaving the 2 sons to Kunti's care. Hence they came to be popularly as Pancha Pandava, because there are 5 brothers. As Pandu died, Dhritarashtra was sworn in the king as the king, and there were quick changes in Hastinapura. Because of the blind king doting on his children, especially Duryodhana, who was in the evil league, as Dushta Chatushtaya, or the 4 wicked men, along with his younger brother Dushyasana, his maternal uncle Shukuni, and Karna, who was declared as the ruler of a subsidiary Angadesha, as he was barred otherwise from royal responsibilities and rights. Since he did not have Kshatriya origin as his son of a charioteer, the evil 4 had constant quarrels with their Pandava cousins due to jealousy, as the cousins were far more disciplined and stronger, as also since Kuru Vamsha elders and others liked them more. The evil 4 pretended sympathy for Pandavas and wanted them to move into a new palace, but their intention was to kill them while sleeping, as the palace was made of lac and susceptible to quick fire. Thanks to Krishna's foresight and precautionary measures, and Pandavas exited safe from the burning palace through a secret passage, underground passage, as the evil 4 misled the public that Pandavas and Kunti were burnt. Meanwhile, Pandavas as Pandavas massacred as Brahmanas. So they wear the dresses of a Brahmana and stayed in a poor family house on rent. When the turn of sparing a person from the landlord's house came up for sacrifice to the demon named Bakasura, as per a contract with the village heads and the demon, that instead of his killing the villagers indiscriminately, Bhima, the strong man, opted to reach the demon's abode away from the village and brought relief to the villagers by killing him in a severe duel. From there on, Pandavas, still appearing as Brahmanas, moved on to the king Drupada's court for Draupadi Swayamvara and succeeded in the test of destroying a fish on a quickly moving wheel kept above one's head by an arrow while viewing its reflection down in a water pool underneath. This feat was possible only to a very excellent archer. Karna and Kauravas attended the Swayamvara too. Only Arjuna could perform the feat as Karna, who too was a great archer, had failed again, causing jealousy on learning that the Brahmanas were fake and actually they were Pandavas. On hearing the good news that after all Pandavas were not dead, the elders of the Kuru Vamsha, including Bhishma, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, were overjoyed, but the evil four were shaken. They agreed that a portion of the kingdom be given away to Pandavas as a place-making measure, and the elders like Bhishma appreciated the gesture. Pandavas thus moved to a new capital called Indraprastha, while a fantastic Maya Sabha, or a palace of illusions built by the divine architect designer by the name of Maya. Recovering from their days of misfortune, Pandavas recouped and performed Rajasuya Yaga and invited Kauravas, including the elders like Bhishma, Drona, Vidura, and Kripacharya, as well as the evil four. The Lord Krishna, who had always been staunch supporter of Pandavas, was honored as the chief guest, and when King Shishupala, the evil opponent of Krishna, objected and insulted Krishna, and Krishna tolerated until he made 108 mistakes because he promised his maternal aunt, the Shishupala's mother, his auntie, for Krishna. So he waited when he counted more than 108 or 108. Then Krishna used Sudarshana Chakra and used and killed Shishupala, snipped his head off with the Sudarshana Chakra. The evil four, especially Duryodhana, felt highly envious of Pandavas, invited them to Hastinapura only to trap Dharmaraja into an unjust chess game with Shakuni, who was an expert in it, and defeated Pandavas against stiff conditions of losing their kingdom and even themselves, including Draupadi, with whom an attempt was made for disrobing. The conditions were 12 years of forest life and 1 year of unidentifiable destination where they should not be recognized, failing which the terms could be doubled. The conditions of forest will be doubled. During the forest life of 12 years, Kauravas tormented Pandavas, and during the year-long Ajnatavasa, or unrecognizable period, took refuge in changed status with Dharmaraja as Kankubhatta and Brahmana, advisor to King Virata in his later court. Draupadi as a Sairendri, as the maid servant in the queen's chamber. Bhima as the cook in the royal kitchen. Arjuna as Brahannada, the transgender dance teacher of the princess Uttara. Nakula and Sahadeva as the keepers of horses and cows in the shed in the palace. During the course of their stay in the Virata Parva, Pandavas underwent unknown torture and humiliation, including the attempted molestation of Sairendri by the king's powerful brother-in-law named Kichaka, who was quietly eliminated by Bhima in a duel war in the night. At the end of their stay incognito, Kauravas tried to capture the cows of King Virata, but by the time Brahannala came into the form of Arjuna as the Ajnatavasa period was over and destroyed the Kaurava army single-handedly, and having utilized the Sammohana Astra or the mantra which made the war stalwarts like Bhishma, Drona, Ashwatthama, and of course the evil four into long slumber and released the cows of King Virata back home. There were talks of Sandhi or reconciliation held by Krishna on behalf of the Pandavas, but the puffed up evil foe refused even to a pin-sized space to the Pandavas. Let alone 5 villages to the 5 some, and a great war of Mahabharata was fought for 18 days, dragging even the elders of Kuru Vamsha like Bhishma, Drona, and quite a few pious persons by the evil foe on one side and Pandavas on the other side, with Krishna as a charioteer for Arjuna, come unarmed advisor of Pandavas. A major casualty from the Pandava side was that brave and young Abhimanyu, the son of Arjuna and Subhadra, in a Chakravyuha, a circular closed fight among many to one unjust encounter. There was a mass destruction on both sides and tragedies of stalwarts, including the entire generation of illustrious elders who took part in the battle, as also the evil foe with Duryodhana as the last to fall to Bhima, who killed Dushasana earlier. The next chapter is Maha Bhagavati. Parashakti allows vision of the dead at Kurukshetra battle. Pursuant to the great battle, the respected ladies of both Kauravas and Pandavas who lost their husbands, sons, grandsons, grandfathers, father-in-laws, nephews, collected in the banks of Ganga river and prayed to Vedavyasa to secure a glimpse of the departed, since the ladies could not go to the battlefield. Among the ladies were Kunti, Gandhari, Draupadi, Subhadra, and Uttara. Dhritarashtra and Pandava heroes were also invited to expected miracle spectacle. The Maharshi performed pranayama and deep yoga oriented meditation to the unknown and omniscient Devi Bhagavati. His intense and continued worship for quite some time, and as an indication of the positive response received from Mahadevi, there were indications on a huge sky log, a celestial screen, and there were quick glimpses of the one-to-one fights and the resultant deaths and reactive celebrations. The screen views of the linga and limbless bodies of the departed souls, which were recognized at once by the concerned eyes, but not the converse. Ashwatthama, next chapter is Ashwatthama punished and Parikshita was born. Ashwatthama could not reconcile to the death of his father Dronacharya, which was otherwise invincible. But as per Krishna's advice, Bhima killed an elephant named Ashwatthama and made Bhima shout that Ashwatthama was killed and conveyed the news to Dronacharya. Drona was horrified at the news. He asked Dharmaraja for confirmation and later confirmed Ashwatthama died the elephant. But he said further in a very low tone saying Ashwatthama hatak kunjaraha. Thus Drona was cheated and hung his bow and arrows and sat still in meditation when Arjuna shivered arrows and killed Dronacharya, desirous of killing. Drona was cheated, but his bow and arrows and sat still in the meditation when Drishtadyumna, Draupadi's brother, he came and killed Drona with his sword. Desirous of killing Arjuna in sleep, Ashwatthama did not find him, but thus killed the full party of Arjuna's sons in sleep. In turn, Arjuna located Ashwatthama and fought a fierce battle. Drona's son finally used Brahmastra, the most potent astra. Arjuna too retaliated by the use of the same astra and controlled Ashwatthama. Yudhishthira and Krishna advised not to kill Ashwatthama but to cut the naturally born Shranga, jewel, diamond horn, which itself was an ugly insult to him. The impact of Ashwatthama's Brahmastra would have normally torn off Arjuna's pregnant daughter-in-law Uttara, but for Lord Krishna's mystic intervention, protected the child. The child thus born on Uttara was called Parikshit, who was then the last remnant of Pandavas. As a king, Parikshit was highly spiritual and benevolent. Once, when he was concluded royal hunt and got thirsty, he visited the ashrama hermitage of sage Samaika, who was in deep meditation and thus did not respond to king's visit. He was annoyed and picking up a dead snake fallen on the ground nearby, picked up in his brow and placed it around the Muni's head as a garland. On return to the hermitage, the sage's son Shringi saw the ugly sight and gave a curse that whoever did this insult to my father would be killed within a week's time. The king, having known of the curse, was apprehended himself on the banks of the river Ganga and requested Mahamuni Shuka to enlighten him the great Purana of Maha Bhagavata. On the seventh day, with all the security in seven-storied building on the river banks, Taksha made efforts to sneak in the building somehow and intercepted a Brahmana by name Kashyapa, who desirous of making wealth from relieving the king's problem, as he knew the mantra of anti-snake bite. Daksha gave away plenty of money to the Brahmana and got rid of him. In fact, he tested the Brahmana whether he could really administer the mantra and revive an entire tree burnt by poisonous flames of serpent's bite. The Brahmana did convert the tree ashes to its original position. The Brahmana did convert the tree's ashes to its original position. Later in the evening, Taksha asked disciples to disguise as a Brahmana to carry fruits to the king on the pretext of reciting Atharvana Veda, and the fruit which the king ate contained a small insect, which was Takshaka himself, assuming enormous body, and he bitten King Parikshit. But before that, Parikshit listened the entire Bhagavata Purana and he attained salvation with the God Krishna's blessings. The next chapter is I'm giving summarizing the chapters. Janamejaya did conduct a Sarpa Yajna, that's called snake sacrifice, stopped by sage Asita and Vedavyasa. Later, when King Parikshit met his end, his son Janamejaya was hardly a lad of 11 or 12 years old and was declared as the next king of the Hastinapura. Guru Kripacharya trained him in the science of archery, administration, and Dharmashastra. He was married to Upustama, the daughter of the king of Kashi, and carried on with pious activities. Meanwhile, sage Uttanka approached Janamejaya and provoked him to take revenge on his father's killer Taksha and perform Sarpayagna, sacrifice of serpents, and command Taksha into the fire pit, Homakunda, and sacrifice all the serpents in the process. Sage Udhanka told the king that his father could not go to heaven because of the snake bite. Convinced thus, the king ordered that the yajna be arranged. Thousands of snakes were burnt off, and Taksha was so afraid of his life that he sought refuge from Indra. But so revengeful were Janamejaya and sage Utanka that they were prepared to command not only Taksha but even Indra to Sarpayajna as he was supporting Taksha and haul them into the fire pit. Taksha thus approached sage Asita to call the king and to refrain from proceeding further in the sacrifice as thousands of innocent snakes were being burned. For the sake of Taksha biting the Parikshit Maharaj. Vedavyasa explained the episode of sage Asita and King Ruru to the king in the olden days. There was a sage, Jarakrito, who was practicing high devotion to Devi Bhagavati in a forest. He had a vision of his dead father. He had a vision of his dead father and forefathers in a cave who asked him to marry and suggested an eligible woman named Jaratkaru, who was the sister of Vasuki. Meanwhile, the co-wives of sage Kashyapa, Kadru, and Vinita had an argument as to what was the color of the horses of the sun god's chariot. Vinita guessed the color as white, but Kadru had a bet that color was a black. It was agreed that whoever lost the bet would have to carry the other on her back, always while going to places. Kadru asked her sons to color the horses black to win the bet, while some of her sons obeyed her, but others did not. Kadru cursed thus those who did not comply, be burnt off in a fire pit, and Vinita virtually became Kadru's slave. Vinita's son Garuda, the carrier of Maha Vishnu, asked for the cause of her sorrow, and she narrated as to what happened. Out of his affection for his mother, Garuda approached Kadru to pardon his mother, and Kadru agreed provided that Garuda could bring Amrit, nectar, from the custody of Vaikunta. Garuda was bent on relieving his mother's curse and fetched a jug of nectar from Vaikunta. Kadru was delighted and released Vinita. All the family members and friends of Kadru were invited and asked to clean up themselves before taking spoonsful of Amrit. But Indra quietly stole away the jug of Amrit. The invitees of Kadru returned from their baths and found that the jug was missing. They were disappointed but tried their best to lick any drops out of the jar that might have split on the grass, Kusha, and as they liked, their tongues were cut and hence were known as Dvijivas, or two-tongued ever since. Vasuki and others who were troubled by Kadru approached Lord Brahma and and uh, Lord Brahma and they complained against Kadru, the mother of snakes. He blessed them and said that the younger sister of Vasuki, Jaratkaro, should be proposed to wed sage Jaratkaro. But the sage was highly short-tempered and the bride should be very obedient and trustworthy, and the couple would beget a child who would enlighten, control, and discipline the whole community of snakes and enlighten the burden of their over haughtiness to the world. That was why the sage Asita prevailed upon King Janamejaya to stop the unequal Sarpayajna, and Vedavyasa too approved of sage Asita's request. Maharshi Vasa had suggested that instead of revenge-oriented Sarpayajna, he should rather build a spacious temple dedicated to Devi Bhagavati and also perform Devi Mahayajna and such other spiritual activities to release the soul of late King Parikshit and relieve the curse of Brahmanabhai. Vision of Bhagavati by Trimurtis. King Janamejaya asked about the significance of Mahadevi Bhagavati Yajna and from Vedavyasa, since he felt confused as to who should be targeted to put one's wholehearted devotion, as multi-dimensional attention to gods might get diffused even to star yogis, let alone normal human beings, especially because of concentration in human mind is highly erratic and fluid against the powerful pull of material distractions. The normal belief had been that one would anchor on either Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, or Mahadeva, the destroyer, each representing the Rajas, Sattvic, and Tamas guna, respectively. But to say that an amalgam of all gunas as Devi Bhagavati was perhaps an oversimplification. Even sun god, whose visibility was a clear phenomena, is directly perceptible before one's own vision. Vedavyas Maharshi replied that this question was no doubt relevant, but was replied in the past by the Trinity themselves. At the stage when Maha Vishnu killed Madhu Kaitava by expanding his thigh space, the Trinity had clearly comprehended that Devi Parashakti, who had no form nor dimension and was the endless and unequal energy. There were heavenly directions to the Trinity at the time of universal destruction to perform tapasya or meditate, to create, to promote, and destroy illusion, as the Trinity themselves got no leads to create what he and how to promote, which and where. That was the illusion or Maya. The Trinity wondered that as there was no earth but a huge ocean, no five elements of nature. The five elements of the nature are: number one is earth, number two is the light, number three is the air, number four is the sky, and number five is the water. So earth, water, light, air, sky makes five elements of nature. No five tanmatras are the causative elements of a sabda or sound, sparsha or touch, behind touch, rupa or slight, gandha or smell, and rasya, gandha or smell, and rasa or taste. No sensual organs, and no gunas, suguna, durguna, nirguna, goodness, evil, of equanimity. How could the process of creation be initiated? In reply, a Vamana or air float was sent to carry the Trinity towards the sky and landed at a place where was no water but ground. The palace looked like a beautiful city with well-lit buildings, gardens, water fountains, trees with ripe fruits and splashes of flowers with divine fragrances, conditioned air and lightning, apparently the gateway to heaven. The aeroplane was lifted up again and flew low to let the Trinity watch the Nandana garden. Surabhi the cow, Parijata the celestial tree, the Airavata the divine elephant, a heavy beautiful Apsara at a dance, Gandharvas on singing, and finally heads like Varma, Agni, Surya, moon, and host of Devatas. And there Devas. Finally, the aeroplane reached the Sudhasagar, ocean of nectar, and in its midst they were found in the Manidvipa, or the island of gems, in which caught with the four legs represented by Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, and all other demigods was sighted. The Trinity then had the super vision of extraordinary radiance, thinking of flashings of a physical manifestation of Mahadevi, Bhagavati, Mata. The top portion of the cart represented is Sadashiva in the form of colorful rainbow with a red carpet beveled and spread over. She sat gracefully, smiling, wearing a red garment, a garland with red flowers and red sandal paste on her forehead with Bhagavati sat on Shiva, gracefully smiling, wearing a red garment, a garland with red flowers, and a red sandal paste on her forehead, with black eyes and red lips, four hands wearing a noose, a lotus, a gourd, and an Akshaya Patra, an eternally filled vessel, as though she was about to give boons. Even the birds around were chanting mystic incantations. The Trinity, that is Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, three people, three gods, had a supervision of extraordinary radiance, twinkling flashings of physical manifestation of Mahadevi Bhagavati. The top portion of the cart represented Sadashiva in the form of a colorful rainbow with a red carpet spread all over. She sat gracefully smiling, wearing a red garment, a garland with red flowers and red sandal paste on her forehead, with black eyes and red lips, four hands wearing noose, lotus, gourd, and rakshya patra, an eternally filled vessel, as though she was about to give away boons. Even the birds around were chanting mystic incantations of Mula mantras like Hreem. Examples of Mula mantra, seed mantra are Om Aim Sau, Sau Kleem Aim, Om Aim Hreem Kleem Chamundaye Viche, Om Aim Hreem Kleem Chamundaye Viche. This is called Navarana mantra. Om Aim Hreem Kleem Chamundaye Viche is Navarana mantra. Examples of Mula mantra, seed mantras are Om Aim Hreem Shreem Om Ka A E La Hreem Hasakala Hreem Sakala Hreem Om Aim Kleem Sau Kleem Aim Om Aim Hreem Kleem Chamundaye Viche Am Hreem Krom Aim Kleem. This Navarana mantra is a very auspicious, and we use Navarana mantra for Chamundeshwari Yajna, Yaga, Om Haim Rim Klim Chamundaye Viche Swaha. We chant like that. The Bhagavati had earrings or of the shape of Sri Chakra. She was surrounded by Devis like Prileka and others like Angakusuma. She was seated in the Satkona, seven-angled, yantra format. Lord Vishnu of the Trinity recognized her as he saw her in the same physical manifestation when he was a toe-sucking boy on a human form on a banana leaf floating on a massive water surface, and blessed him to create Brahma and Maheshwara and advised that process of creation be taken up as soon as possible. Lord Vishnu said that the Trinity was fortunate with their vision of Mahadevi and the tapasya meditation that was performed by them all through the duration of yugas had succeeded. As he started like that, Lords Brahma and Ishvara were choked with emotion and endless joy and prostrated before the unparalleled vision with a humility and gratitude. As soon as the Trinity entered the entry point of Sanctum Sanctorium, where Devi Bhagavati was seated seemingly that three some Brahma, Vishnu, Ishvara were converted into stunning feminine forms. Devi Bhagavati was seated smilingly. The three some of Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara were converted into stunning feminine forms. Another astonishing miracle was that the entire universe was witnessed on her toenails, including the Trinity and their abodes, the Pancha Bhutas, Indra, all the other devas, Gandharvas, Apsaras, the humanity, ocean of mantras, mountains, sages like Vedavyasa, and galaxy view of Simshumara. An astonishing miracle was that the entire universe was witnessed on her toenails, including the Trinity and their abodes. the Panchabhutas, Indra, all other devas, Gandharvas, Apsaras, the humanity, oceans, mountains, sages like Vedavyasa, the galaxy, view of Simshumara, Ashwinis, and so on. नमोस्तोऽनन्ताय सहस्रमूर्तये सहस्रपादाक्षरवासासुनाम्ने पुरुषाष्टये सहस्रकोटियुगधारिणे नमः सहस्रकोटियुगधारिणे नमः आकाशात् पतितं यथागिरसागरं सर्वदेव नमस्कारः श्रीकेशं प्रयत्यो नमः सर्ववेदेशत्पुण्यं सर्वतीर्थेषु यत्फलं तत्फलं पुण्यवाप्तवासनात् वासुदेवस्य वासन्ते जगत्रयं सर्वभूतनिवासोऽस्ति वसन्ते कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि नारायणायेति समर्पयामि नारायणायेति समर्पयामि। ओम शंभवे नमः विश्वेश्वराय महादेवाय त्र्यंबकाय त्रिपुरांतकाय त्रिकाग्निकालाय कालाग्निरुद्राय नीलकंठाय मृत्युंजयाय सर्वेश्वराय सदाशिवाय श्रीमन् महादेवाय नमः। ओम हैं ह्रीं क्लीं चामुंडाय विच्चे ओम हैं ह्रीं क्लीं चामुंडाय विच्चे ओम हैं ह्रीं क्लीं चामुंडाय विच्चे। हरि ओम तत्सत्।